Back when the original Pacific Rim movie came out, I was, of course, drawn to it immediately. Even though it was a Hollywood movie, it had all the makings of anime inspiring. Like, you had the gigantic mechas like Gundam, you had the kaijus fighting them. Everything screamed anime. And so, of course, I was kind of drawn to it to kind of see Hollywood's take on essentially Gundam in a sense. And I was entertained. Like, I did enjoy watching that movie, but the thing that was always in the back of my head when I was watching that movie was, man, I would love an anime of this. Like, I would love Japanese creators and writers and animators to get a hold of this property and do something with it. And that was mainly because I was intrigued by the neurolinking system they did. Of course, there's two people that have to get in the cockpit of this gigantic robot, and they had to sync their minds to each other so they can control. They're basically becoming, two sides of the brain in order to control this big, huge mecha, because one person alone cannot handle it. And so, like I said, I was really fascinated by this because what that introduced was the idea of two people opening up their entire selves to somebody else. And so all their memories and everything will flood into each other. And I'm like, man, I would just love an anime of this where you just got, like I said, Japanese writers that are willing to get into some really nitty gritty emotional stuff. Because let's be honest, and at least in my opinion, I don't feel like the creators in the West, I guess, have the guts to really tackle really psychological, difficult things. They're very safe about things. And so, like I said, I was like, I want an anime of this so bad. And I remember at some point, and I kind of stripped away from it. I'm like, to be honest, I'm not a Pacific Rim fan. I don't even think I watched the second movie. I didn't watch. Apparently, there was another animated thing that was done. I didn't get into any of the other properties they made of it. It was just that one movie. So when I heard that there was going to be a Pacific Rim being done in Japan, I was like, holy crap, this is exactly what I was asking for. And I don't know if I knew at the time, but I was soon to be disappointed because, and this is something I didn't really kind of look into again until after I watched this series, Pacific Rim the Black, that I didn't realize that it didn't really have much Japanese, I guess, say in it. This is essentially a series. Again, it was posted here recently on Netflix, and like I said, I immediately jumped to it because I knew one thing. It was being done by Polygon Pictures. And I'm a huge fan of Polygon Pictures. I loved Nice Sidonia. I loved Ajin. I even though I do have my issues with CGI being used instead of, regular hand-drawn animation, I've always seemed to enjoy a lot of Polygon Pictures works. And so the only thing that really drew me to this one specifically was going to be the fact that it was going to be done by Polygon Pictures. But unfortunately, that's pretty much where it lays. The directing was done by a lot of folks at Polygon Pictures, and I believe they're mostly all just episode directors and working with the CG. A lot of them are CG directors. Everything was written and controlled by a Western company, and specifically the writers was Greg Johnson and Craig Kyle. Nothing against those two creators, do not get me wrong. My whole point is that going into this, I was expecting an anime take on Pacific Rim, but unfortunately I didn't realize until after I'd watched the show that it was going to not have that, I guess, creative talent behind it. Again, I'm not saying that Greg Johnson and Craig Kyle are not talented people. They're not the Japanese writing that I'm used to. And what I mean by this is, let me get into the actual show itself. So the series essentially takes place after the Pacific Rim. Australia is overrun by these kaiju. They're emerging from these rifts in the ground, and they're just destroying everything and eating people. And mankind is trying to fight back with these huge mecha robots called Jaegers, and they're failing miserably. And this particular Pacific Rim the Black follows two children, Haley and Taylor. And they're both saved by their parents who are Jaeger pilots, and their parents run off to, continue the battle, leaving them in kind of a secluded location out in the middle of nowhere where they can hide away with the rest of the people that survived. And after about 5 years, Haley discovers that there's a training Jaeger underground underneath this particular place they were left. And upon activating it, it calls in a Jaeger, not Jaeger, a kaiju. They have to fight the kaiju. Their colony basically is ruined, and so they set out in this training Jaeger to find their parents. And the story pretty much advances from there to them running into a group of other survivors who are basically trying to survive in their own way. Think something similar to the likes of things like The Walking Dead and stuff, where you have a post-apocalyptic setting and everybody is kind of creating their own, I guess, groups of surviving in their own way. And so they make their own rules and everything. The one particular one they deal with a lot is ran by a guy named Shane. He is pretty much, if you don't do what I tell you and you step out of line, you're dead. Yeah, that's his whole thing. It's just basically ruled by an iron fist. And he's collecting kaiju eggs and giving them to the Sisterhood, which we don't really get to see much of. But I'm sure that'll be something they'll get into in other seasons if they decide to make more seasons of this. And that's basically the premise, is them trying to not only survive the kaiju, but also survive the people. And like I said, it is very similar to The Walking Dead in the idea that you have like this setting of kaijus attacking mankind, and let's get into how nasty humans are. that's kind of where I got in the end of it. But like I said, the thing is that coming into this, like I said, all I seen was Polygon pictures. That's what drew me. I think even if I seen that it was written by, Western creators, I probably still would have watched, just because, again, I'm a fan of Polygon pictures. But what I noticed is that when I was watching it and we started getting into a lot of the stuff like the Neuralink and stuff like that, I quickly did realize that it was very safe. Like, it didn't get as nitty and gritty as I was hoping it would get. And like I said, it wasn't something that really kind of I made a conclusion of until after I finished and looked into the writers and everything. And like I said, nothing against those writers, but they played it very Hollywood safe. And that's what bugged me. I felt like, yeah, May has a tragic past. She was made to be a killer. That's it. Like, we don't really get to see any of it. We don't get to see her struggling with anything. No, it just shows her shooting unknown targets. And apparently she's a killer. And that's what I mean by this could have been so much better, but that's all we get. Like, that was the pull that I had, was let's get into some messed up histories. Let's get into some people struggling with things and them having to link with each other and dealing with that difficulty. Now, granted, that aside, and that's really my whole point, is I have an issue with the idea that you don't really have enough human conflict, like inner human conflict in these neural linking processes. Instead, what we get is more sci-fi, the technology itself side of it. The fact that it's difficult to link with somebody else. The side effects of you screwing up this Neuralink, people being completely mind fried, basically, to being comatose to a sense and brain dead. The idea of somebody having somebody else's memories get trapped in them. The whole aspect of solo piloting, that kind of aspect, the side effects of solo piloting. That stuff is cool. Don't get me wrong. I am interested in that stuff. But like I said originally, what I was drawn to in Pacific Rim and what I wanted an anime for was the human aspect. The human aspect of linking with somebody else, what that would bring into effect. The dramas that would bring into effect. And it's almost to the point where I think the original Pacific Rim got more into that than this did. And that's the sad thing. So, very much disappointing in that regard. Outside of that, everything else was fine. I was actually very entertained by this show. I was stuck from episode 1 all the way to episode 7. I had a lot of fun watching this show. So even though I am getting very negative, don't get me wrong, this was a fun series to watch. And I think that was mainly because the characters are still fun. I did enjoy Taylor and Haley. I thought they were a great main characters. They really did feel like a pair of siblings trying to survive in the world. Their struggles with each other, their reliances on each other, that kind of stuff. It was like that kind of sibling love that I actually really did enjoy, and I thought it was very natural. May is a fantastic character. I really did like her, despite her, insights into her mind being a little bit, shallow. It got into some really cool stuff later on with that. It got into how essentially they're using this Neuralink stuff to do more than just pilot. They're using it to interrogate people. They're using it to possibly change minds, and I'll just leave it at that. I did like those aspects of it as well. Shane, I thought, was a pretty decent villain. I mean, he there wasn't really anything spectacularly unique about him or game changing. He was just a good villain, just enough to be there. You knew he was probably doing it for the reasons that he's doing it. It's like I said, it's the post apocalyptic conundrum. Ruling by an iron fist in order to survive kind of aspect, dog eat dog world. So that worked out well. I was kind of, it was funny because that towards the later part of it, it got really. This is a really funny thing. Towards the end of it, I thought the series got very anime. I was like, "Whoa, okay, this is very anime. This what we're doing right here in this last episode is very anime." Then come to find out that was actually something that was already in the mythos of Pacific Rim. Like they were already getting into this kind of way of expanding the world, and I do find it interesting. I think that is a pretty cool way to advance the world itself, and I'm sure again, unless they do it in other animated stuff or something else, or if they do a sequel of this, I'm sure they'll get into it. But I think it's a cool way of I guess evolving the world that Pacific Rim is in. You can only do so much of big mechas fighting kaiju. You can only do so much of humans are worse than the monsters kind of thing, which I'm never a fan of. When Walking Dead got into that stuff, it lost me. Once the zombies were basically just background noise, it lost me. And sadly, this is like I said, another case of that happening. I did enjoy this series, but it also has that syndrome of the kaiju's become the background noise. Like it, yeah, we technically did get, at least a kaiju appearance once an episode ish, but it was a little bit lacking in comparison to other mediums of this similar type. So yeah, it was a solid series. Like I said, I enjoyed it. Visual style, I think it's good. I think that every time Polygon Pictures comes out with something, they seem to evolve their style a little more. This one had a little bit more color to it, a lot more style to it than things like Knights of Sidonia, where it was very grayish, and even with Ajin, it was very kind of toned down. This one's got a lot more color to it, a lot more, I guess, cel-shadedness to the characters themselves, which is great. The combat sequences were decent. I enjoyed quite a bit of them. I really did like the fight with the parents protecting the colony and grabbing the missile and shoving it into the kaiju. There was some cool parts, but nothing really truly spectacular for combat related scenes. I mean, like other series like Knights of Sidonia had some incredible combat sequences, and this one's a little bit more kind of toned down, but they were still fun. And I think it's also really helped by the sound design. They had a lot of great sound to the series, a lot of, I guess, depth to the noise and sound effects. I will say that it seemed like it was a little bit overly based. Like, I usually like to watch a lot of my shows with a lot of sound, and this one just sounded like at times there was just way too much bass, and it just sounded like rumble and nothing really else. So, but nothing like a deal breaker to it in any way, shape, or form. So, the one big upset that I did have with this on Netflix is we did not get a Japanese audio option, and I was very disappointed in that. Which does make sense because it is like fully written and everything in the West, but it was still, it's an anime style and it is animated by Polygon Pictures. I have heard that they do have a Japanese audio of this series. It's just for some reason worldwide release of it did not have that option, and all I can think of is they didn't want it to be in the options for some reason to push, I guess, their voice acting groups in the West, I guess, is the best way to put it. And that's kind of disappointing. Not that the English version is bad. I enjoyed it. I think everybody did a great job with the series. There was only one hiccup and it was the reason why I started looking for it. I honestly started the series in English. And it wasn't until this point that I was like, this sounds weird, switching. And that was Haley in the past. For some reason, I don't know if it's the same voice actress that's doing Haley as adult is the same one that did the younger version. I'm assuming so. It just didn't sound right. She didn't sound like a kid. And it was like, Wait, is this like some weird thing where they're merging, current self and younger self in the mental mind or something? No, it's just that for some reason, did not pull off her younger self very well. So, but other than that, it was well done, and a lot of the dialogue was fun. There was a lot of little goofy moments in it. I remember like Haley skipping through all the training sessions. The snarkiness of the AI Loa in the training Jaeger was really fun as well. Some good dialogue and exchange, and some, like I said, decent voice acting from the English side, because I didn't really have a choice. I think that's it though. I guess the last thing I will point out is I am a little bit disappointed in the aspect that there is no that this does not conclude. Being 7 episodes did feel short. It feels like they were just kind of covering an arc specifically, but it just kind of ends. Like it is one of those ones where you almost think that there's supposed to be another episode. The way that it ends is very abrupt, and they're kind of in the middle of dealing with the situation, and so that is a huge negative to it, I would say. So it is one of those things where I do kind of almost want to suggest people don't watch this until they get a second season announced, unless you're a huge Pacific Rim fan. I wouldn't know if this is good for a huge Pacific Rim fan, because I don't know what people would accept and what people want with the storyline of the series. Like I said, I do know the stuff that seemed like it was out there apparently is already in some of the Pacific Rim stuff, so I think that they'll probably still enjoy it. But I guess the struggle that I do have is for people that come to me, or coming to me because I'm an anime fan and I cover anime stuff. And it's difficult for me to really suggest this series to an anime fan. I think you'll probably enjoy it, but you're not going to get that feeling of a Japanese writer. You're not going to get that feeling of being able to tackle things that, let's be honest, the Western creators really try to avoid. They don't like to get in this kind of stuff. They like to play things very safe, and that's really technically what they did with a lot of the content in this. Not showing a lot of stuff, being very safe about what they show, being safe about what they get into, and that's going to be a disappointment to a lot of people. But if you're just looking for a goofy, like, action show, even then, it's going to be a struggle to suggest. I mean, if you do like things like Walking Dead, and you like that aspect of the struggle between the Beast and the Beast and humans, you're probably going to enjoy it as well. Overall, I did enjoy the series, though, and it was entertaining. I did enjoy it. I watched it from beginning to end without stop. Um, some decent characters in there, some good action scenes, good sound. Polygon Pictures, as usual, doing a good job with animations. They do skip frames, keep that in mind, but I think Polygon Pictures is going to stick to. But overall, good series. I hope you guys enjoyed my impressions of it. If you did, please leave a like. Please comment. Let me know what you thought of the series, or if you're going to check it out. And as always, if you did like this, please also subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope you all enjoyed, and y'all take care.